Hello everybody. About a year ago I made this thing, a metallic raspberry from a prompt I found on Facebook. It was lots of fun to make, pretty simple. I'd make it a bit differently these days. I'd actually use geometry nodes, and I'll show you that towards the end of the video. But one of you reached out and asked me, how do I make all these balls different color? Well, let's dive in and have a look. Okay, so quick reminder of how we got here. Create yourself a icosphere. Go to the operations panel, subdivisions, level 3. We're going to create another object, in this case a sphere. Make sure the icosphere is selected, select everything, Control P, object. So now the icosphere is the parent of our sphere. In our icosphere, go to the mesh data properties, scroll down to instancing, click vertices, and the UV sphere we've added is now being instanced at every vertex, and we can scale that down until we get our object. Finally, I'm going to right click and shade smooth, and we've got ourselves a lovely object. Let's jump into the shading workspace. Okay, in the shading workspace, make sure you've got the sphere selected, otherwise you won't see what's going on, and create a new material. This is going to be relatively straightforward. What we're going to do is we're going to change the base color. In fact, let's change it now so we can see that it is changing all of our objects. Brilliant. Now, because these are objects, even though they're being instanced, we can actually use the object info to change this. So I'm going to type in object info. You could also just add an object info, and I'm going to link it to the random socket of object info. And you can see here that each one of these is getting a different value, and that different value is between 0 and 1. So what we can do now is plug it into a color ramp. So I'm going to add in a color ramp. And it won't look any different initially because we've just got black to white. But this is where you can go and add in some extra colors. Now, just bear in mind this one on the end, if you decide to set this to a constant, will actually not appear. That's important to know because you'll need to move it along and in for it to appear when you have constant. So 5 sliders here, you'll get 4 colors. The black one we can change to, let's say, a blue. Then we've got this gray one here. Let's change it to a green. Let's change this grey one to an orange, and this final one here maybe to a yellow. Now, each of these are discrete colours, so this is great if you've got a colour palette. However, if you don't go for constant and you go for something else, like linear, they'll blend between and you get a different selection. And that's when this white on the end will appear. And you can pick other interpolations as well if you want. And there you go. This is how you get separate colors on each of your objects. Now, this also works when you're instancing an object in geometry nodes. So as promised, let's show you how to do that right now. Go over to your geometry nodes workspace. I'm going to hide my icosphere out of the way. I'm going to create new mesh object to place this on. It's just going to be a basic cube. Let's create a new geometry node tree, and we can just unplug it for the moment. We're going to use everything here within geometry nodes. So we're going to add in a mesh primitive that is an icosphere. Remember, before we had a subdivision level 3, and we can plug that into the end here if we want. Now we want to also add on a UV sphere if we wanted to match what we had before. So I'm going to go ahead and go to mesh primitives again and just add in a UV sphere. Now I'm not going to play with the settings here at the moment, but I want to instance this UV sphere onto that. So we're going to add in instances, instance on points. The points of the icosphere, the UV mesh here is our instance, and it looks pretty much the same as it did before. Now we need to scale down this UV sphere. We could do it here in the radius, or we could have a bit more control over it by actually adding in a transform node. That's entirely up to you. I'm just going to use the search feature here to look for transform, and we can plug that in, and then we can change the scale independently as well. So if you wanted a slightly different look to it, you can do, or you can change everything like so. Now, I also want it to be smooth, and it's getting a bit bunched up here, so let's move things out the way. Right, so here we go. We're going to type in smooth, and is shade smooth? No, we want to set it shade smooth. So that's now set as shade smooth. And finally, this doesn't have the appropriate material, and we can use the exact same material as we did before. So we can go in, material, set material, and pick that material that we used on the previous object. And because this is instancing objects, this will work on that object level. Now you need to do something slightly different if it's just a single mesh object, and I'll be releasing a video really soon covering that, so subscribe so you don't miss it, hit the bell icon. Okay, we all love our real world examples when it comes to this. You've learnt the basics. We've got a blade of grass here, just a model that we want to instance across a landscape. If we come out of a local view here, we can see the grass is active and placed on this plane with a house in the background, and we've got a sort of dried out grass look here. And if we go over to our shading workspace, which we are actually already in, and make sure we're on the right material, so let's go and have a look at the grass material, we can see here that we actually have these two color ramps. So we've got this random that we've already set up, and I've put it into a mix node here so I can just quickly show you the difference. We can have a summer and we can fade it out, so you could do an animation like this as well, because you could animate that factor. And we've got our color palettes essentially in here. Now, the only other thing that I would want to do here is over in our geometry node setup, and I should show you how that is working as well. Let's make sure I've got the plane selected, and let's run through what's going on here. So we've got our geometry coming in, which is just a bent plane. We're distributing points on faces, so we're generating the points for these to be instanced on, and you can see there's currently 5,000 of them. Those points get passed through to an instance on point, and then we set our material. So let's have a look at what happens with the instance itself. And of course, here there's a purple line going from the normal all the way down to the rotation. So the grass isn't always pointing upwards, it's just pointing the same direction the ground is facing. Then we get a bit of variance across the land here. Now we're transforming this instance as it's coming in because it's too big, so we're scaling it down quite considerably, otherwise it looks a wee bit ridiculous. Like so. Let's bring that back down, and then we've got an object info node, and we're just selecting our grass. Now if you had multiple objects that you wanted to instance, you could put them inside a collection and go to add input, and then we've got a collection info. It's very similar, but we can add a collection of objects to instance across the land instead. And there we go. That's how that is all set up. And I want to just bring up the density here. I'm going to set it to maybe 15,000, and then let's render that out and see how it looks. Okay, the grass is still a little tall, but that is not bad. Awesome. Now go forth and make some awesome stuff. And if you want to learn more about Blender, check out this video.